Warning.
Warning.
Warning!
Now for a word of caution.
The information you are about to hear is the exact knowledge they don't want you to know. Only on the Bridge Podcast, hosted by Travis Haley.
Christian, good to have you here, man. So, Christian Schauf, he's a founder of Uncharted Supply out of Park City, Utah. You got a lot of stories. You got a whole colorful life of experience that I think would be fun to talk about a little bit today. But I met you. Actually, we just dealt with this. Like my son, my son walked in and he was in a entrepreneur camp when he was probably
I think he said 5th grade. How old is he now?
He's 17. So
that can't be right.
Yeah, but this was about 7 years ago or 5 years ago or something like that.
It had to be about 5 years ago.
Yeah. And you were doing a talk to the school about entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
And then he comes home and says, Dad, there's this guy, I want to, it's survival, blah, blah, blah. And so we linked up, and then I did a podcast with you. And then here we are 5 years later, and your company's grown, Uncharted Supply, which is a cool, I mean, I've got all your stuff.
Thank you.
And I wanted to talk about that today and why you got into that kind of world. And I think it's appropriate because this month is preparedness month.
Yeah, preparedness month. I mean, that's what, FEMA picks September every month because you get fires, you get hurricanes, you get just about everything. It's kind of a convergence of seasons, right?
Yeah, we've had multiple earthquakes in the last couple of weeks, like over the 7.0 scale. Massive floods. We just had some bad floods here, just recently because monsoon season here in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody comes here and thinks, well, it's a desert, right? And next thing you know, there's cars and houses flooding away, and people don't understand it, especially if they're visiting here and they're out hiking in the mountains in Sedona or wherever, and a flash flood comes through. Like, they're not prepared for that. So
things can happen fast.
Yeah. So talk about, if you don't mind, for our listeners, because we do work in the same circles in the world, but from a preparedness and survival standpoint, I'd love to know how you got into that. Just what motivated you to do it, and what was your life before that? Like when you grew up, because of the music stuff you got more. Christian has more combat tours than I think anybody does combined, and probably been shot at more, and was never in the military. So you want to talk about that real quick?
I don't know if you call them combat. I always say I definitely wasn't a cowboy, but I was a rodeo clown.
Okay.
I was out there. 39 different trips to the Middle East. So, for a long time, my brother and I, Zach, we managed a lot of the entertainment for Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom, and it was kind of weird how we get into it. So back up, I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, right? So. Man, I got a hernia scar from throwing hay bales when I was 8 years old. I mean, it was hard work, no little league, around a lot of capable people, hardworking people. Went to college in Wisconsin, started playing in a band after college, ended up moving to Minneapolis, Minnesota. We'd play with all the big guys from Minnesota, all the big names you've heard of. And we toured all over the world, 30 some countries, I think, national anthems. The last time I was in Phoenix, actually, I did the national anthem at the NASCAR race.
Really?
Sang it. Yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking about that when I came in. So, we were doing that and it was fun. And, we had these kind of record deal opportunities, but it was always a slavery contract. And it wasn't interesting to me. And we were about to get out. We were at South by Southwest. 2 guys with some high and tight haircuts came up and asked if we'd come play for the troops overseas. And I was like, this sounds awesome. A way to kind of do something good with what we've been doing as a career. So one thing led to another. And, we were over there, and there was, at the time, somebody can, not quote me on this, but it was like 330-ish bases, like FOBs, JSSs, can't think all the stuff. And they were only getting entertainment to like 30 or 40. And the reason being, they were using these old PA systems that were huge that would only fit into a C-130, and they wouldn't convoy entertainment. They deemed it too dangerous. And so all the FOBs and GSSs weren't really getting entertainment unless somebody would go in with an acoustic guitar and play. So my brother and I went back to our friends in Minneapolis. We worked with Prince and his camp and all these guys, right? And we figured out how to build a PA system that fit into a Black Hawk helicopter. So instead of guitar amps, we'd have, pedal boards that were electronic. Instead of wedges for monitors, we'd have in-ears. So everything was small and super hot rodded. And that turned into 39 trips overseas. My band did 150 shows. We were named Armed Forces Entertainers of the Year. But more so, we started sending other groups. We did a thing called Bikes Over Baghdad. We built skate parks and put on BMX shows.
That's right,
the X Games guys. Yeah, we would take Hoobastank over, and the Pussycat Dolls and the Spin Doctors. And that was my life for like 8 or 9 years, was traveling over with these guys. guiding them around, making sure shows happened, and hanging out with the troops and just trying to do our part to be helpful. So, that was a wild, I don't know if I should stop there, keep going, but that was definitely a wild chapter of my life. Yeah.
So how do you transition from that to doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, good question. So, like I said, grew up on a farm, spent all that time with guys like that. When I was home, we'd go for 2 or 3 weeks at a time and have a couple weeks home. So I was hunting, going on mountain climbs, doing this kind of stuff. And as the war wore down and they didn't need us anymore, I took a job in Southern California, and, it just kept slapping me across the face, like that this was a different existence. I was used to problem solvers and nature and space and people figuring things out. And I was suddenly in this very urban lifestyle, in Newport Beach and Los Angeles. And I was watching people just solve things by pushing a button on their phone. Like that was the only solution to anything.
No real self-reliance.
No, I mean, I'd be out on road bike rides and I'd find somebody just sitting in their car with a flat tire, and they didn't have cell service. They didn't know how to change a car tire. So they were just going to sit there until somebody helped them, and so one day I was going to Colorado to go skiing, and it snowed 2 inches in the mountains behind Orange County. And I sat in traffic for 8 hours, and my buddies are sending me powder shots. And I think I hit a tipping point, right? And I'm like, what in the heck? Like, what if this is 2 inches of snow? Like, it's not even an event where I grew up. And so it just took me down this path of like, what's really happening. And my belief was that, the world's changing, right? We're getting more natural disasters. We're getting more overpopulation. We're getting political unrest. We're getting all that stuff. And at the same time, life skills are diminishing. I mean, that's how I put it. My dad was a farmer. My kid's dad is not a farmer, right? Same thing with you. It's like, we're just getting farther away from those kind of careers and those lifestyles where you kind of just knew how to do everything from gardening to animals to tractors to whatever. And so I'm like, man, how do we fix this? How do we change this? I studied a ton on this. And as I was telling you earlier, one of the big things that stuck with me is Freud always was quoted for like survival of the fittest. And while that's really important, what he spent most of his time on was the power of community. And that like, it didn't matter if it was bringing down a woolly mammoth or fighting off an invading army. The only way humans ever got through anything was working together. And I suddenly went from an environment in Wisconsin where if there's a tornado, we'd load up the trucks and go help our neighbors, to California, it rains and everybody locks their door. And I don't mean to rip on California. That was just where it was when this was happening. But it really struck me, I think, the contrast. And so I really set out to go, okay, how do we problem solve this? How do we make people part of the solution and take them away from being a dependent? Yeah. How do we get people not only take care of themselves, but help their neighbor? Because if you can get one person to do that, maybe get 1 million people to do that. And now you've got a movement in the right direction. So for me, I mean, listen, your audience is probably a lot of military guys, a lot of tactical guys, a lot of guys that think about this. But what I was trying to solve for was kind of the in-between, people that are like, I don't know what to do. I have no idea where to start. And how do I help myself? And so what we set out to do is build really high quality stuff that was very simple, that was a game changer. I went to a lot of guys like you and I said, hey, I don't want to know you for you. I want to know what you'd give your 10-year-old son if you weren't home and something happened.
Exactly. And
what's happened is we sell to, the FBI, the CIA, we sell to all these different groups, professional security groups for Fortune 500 companies. And it's really, I'm really proud of it. I think when you make something simple, it inherently works better. And that's become something that a lot of people use. So here we are. There's the intro for you.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think, we talked about a lot of different things, and how do we discuss or share, as you know, I believe the world's a forum, as I always say. The most simple direction, plan, pathway for people possible, right? Mm-hmm. And then, a lot of people will say, well, just keep it simple, stupid, right? And when you talk about that, I think a lot of people misunderstand what that means. And, keeping it simple, stupid, or keeping it simple, straightforward, and there's lots of different ways to say it, was developed around a highly complex thing, right? And this was a Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird.
I didn't actually know that. That's really cool.
Yeah, a lot of people, because I'm guilty, man. Like in the military, hey, keep it simple, stupid. You're yelling across the line or the range or in the shoot house or wherever you're doing, right? Yeah. Trying to get a bow and drill going on a survival course. Like, keep it simple, stupid. It's like, well, what does that mean? Why do you guys keep yelling that at me? And then why am I turning around and yelling it back at people when I become in a staff position? Right. And I start to just pick up a book, read, and I was fortunate enough to meet the very first U-2 pilot as a kid, because my dad worked with him in the Air Force and lived in our own old hometown. And I listened to all these stories, and, and it really resonated with me when it's like, hey, you take this highly complex machine and put a human in it. He's got to fly it as simple as possible. But the last thing you ever want to say is, hey, sir, keep it simple, okay, stupid, as he's about to go up to 70,000 feet and flying, potentially 3 times the speed of sound if he's in a Blackbird versus, U-2 or something. But that's the last thing you want to say. You want to be able to put that man inside this highly complex situation and have it work around him so he doesn't have to work around it, like an iPhone, like we talked about earlier. So when we're developing a program of instruction or a product, like yours, we'll talk about the gear in a second. Like when you showed me that bag for the first time, 5 or 6 years ago, I was like, that is the most simple, stupid, straightforward thing in the world, because it has everything that the average person needs to grab and go and survive off of. And then it also has the ability and the foundation for me to take and add my skill sets and stuff into it, and that's how you designed it. And that's keep it simple, stupid, but we'll never tell the consumer that. So coming back to this conversation about preparedness, self-reliance, survivability, how the hell do we keep that simple, right? And I think you had a pretty good model with that. You had 4 points. You said community. You said, the human factor, the mental and physical abilities that we need to have.
Strength, yeah.
And resources, we'll get into resources and resourcefulness. And we share those same concepts in our training programs. And you started with community a second ago. So let's go back to that and start with this first out of the 4. To help people understand why community, why is that so important? And I think we're starting to realize that in a world like you just mentioned is getting worse. It is, right? And there's a book, I forget the author, but it's called The End of the World is Just the Beginning. And it talks about how we've lived the greatest years of our lives as Americans in the free world. The baby boomers, and then even my generation, ours growing up and on the farm and hunting and doing all those things, and pop culture and America, music, and, and all the things that we thought were so awesome and amazing. That was the peak, they say. And now it's a gradual downhill.
I hate to think that,
but when you read this, you're like, holy shit, that's right.
Yep.
And then you realize that that's what has happened in history. It's just the track. And when you read it, you're like, you know what? It actually makes me feel okay with it. And it makes me realize that, well, maybe I should realize that eventually we all hit our own demise. And so therefore I should motivate myself like that. The mere fact that we're all going to die eventually,
right,
should motivate you to wake up in the morning and do something with that.
I always say life is not a dress rehearsal. Like that's like one of my favorite quotes. Like you don't, like today's over, you don't get that day back. Like you should be the best person you can be and do everything you can every day. I mean, anyway.
And I agree with some of the other great ones out there, like JP saying, and I always reference him, and one day he will be on this podcast. We don't know when yet, but soon. You're all in, man. And if you're not, then you're not living your life to the fullest, and you're not okay the way you are.
Right.
I don't believe that. Anybody that's like, Travis, you're okay the way you are. Don't be so upset. Like, don't tell me that, man. Don't stroke me. Because who wants to be the same as they were yesterday?
Yeah.
Some people do. And that's unfortunate. And I think coming back to a bad situation that could potentially happen, like the earthquakes that just went down. Florida's underwater right now. We have mass flooding sometimes here, blah, 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 fires and stuff in California. You name it. Natural disasters happen all the time. And war. War happens all the time. And if anybody looks out there at all the conflicts in the world, just look up a conflict map. You'll probably shit your pants when you see how many people are getting killed on a daily basis in different countries. What happens if that ever happened here? Well, that'll never happen here. This is America. And we forget that we're one of the youngest countries on the face of the planet. And we forget that, which is very dangerous.
Right.
So it comes back to that community question of, are we doing the right thing in our own communities to be able to help each other when a bad situation happens?
Right. Well, I mean, look, you can live a nerfed up life and just stay in your house and be scared of everything, or you can get out there and live your life to the fullest. And maybe you don't believe an earthquake's going to hit tomorrow, but I can guarantee you, if you're out there going hard every day, things are going to happen. It's just the way life works. Right. And, my philosophy is like, you don't want your first football game to be the Super Bowl. It's like, I like to go out there and hunt and to bike and to run and to push myself and try to fix my truck by myself, because those are just reps for when it really counts, and, I think
what
that's
if somebody
really
says,
important.
well, that's such a paranoid mentality, Christian? Why would you think that way? Why don't you just live your life? Why do you have to go do reps to worry about what bad things are going to happen? How do you answer that?
I enjoy it. I don't know. If I'm sitting on the couch at night and, you know, my Garmin has a body battery, right? And if I'm fully charged, it says 100 in the morning. And if I'm fully empty, it says 5. If I'm sitting on the couch, it says 23, I'm probably gonna go run around the block. Like, that's my mentality. Like, if I'm not squeezing all of my energy out every day, and I think that's just something you build up to. And maybe I'm weird, I don't know, but like, I want to be the best person I can be. Like you said, you got to be all in, and I enjoy the hard stuff. The hard stuff makes everything better. So for me, it's not paranoia. I'm not doing this because I'm like, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, I might die tomorrow. I just have this mindset of like, why not me? Why should I depend on somebody else to fix something? Why should I depend on somebody else to solve my problems? Like, here's a good example. Like, I got a bunch of buddies in Park City that are Olympians, right? And we go do stuff all the time, whether it's skiing or biking or running. And these guys are gold medal Olympians. But I look at them and I'm like, we're the same age, we're the same height, we're living in the same town. I should be able to do this, right? And there's no way in hell. I mean, they're superhumans, but it makes me feel good to try to hang with them. And then at the end of the day, I'm better off because of it, you know?
Yeah.
And so I don't know, maybe it's just a mentality, but that's how I live my life.
Yeah. What makes you beat your best? Yeah. It's, cause if you're not at your peak, if you're not at your best, especially in a bad situation, I think we can all agree that doesn't help anybody.
Doesn't help anybody. Yeah. No, I mean, and just that mentality, I think, makes everything, if you're choosing to do hard things, I think it makes the hard things that you don't choose to do easier, you know?
Yeah.
You're used to operating in that kind of stressful environment, and you've been there before a ton. And so you're going to be more successful.
I don't think, I used the, was it one of the podcasts? Oh, it was Mike Jones. We're talking about pencil sharpening, right? If a pencil was an actual human being with a conscience and feelings and emotions, and you put it into a sharpener, it would hurt. And so people are afraid to sharpen themselves because it hurts. But once you get a taste of that and you start to, enjoy it like you're talking about, the same thing with a knife. How do you keep a knife sharp? You got to pound it. You got to grind it. You got to beat it. You got to, especially when it's being made. If you think about a knife being made, that's what humans are. We're being made every day. And so the less pounding, the less folding, the less scorching, the less forging you do, the weaker you're going to be.
Yeah, you're worthless.
And I think in a worst case situation, you're going to wish that you were the best, baddest mofo in the world. Everybody does. I've been in a lot of bad situations, and I remember sitting there getting emotional in those situations going, I should be better right now. I don't have the skill sets. I don't know what dope to put on my rifle. I don't know what I should do. I don't know should I go left, should I go right? And I'm like, then I sit back and go, well, why? Because I didn't pound myself enough. I didn't sharpen myself enough. And so I think that's what some of those situations that we find ourselves in our life motivate us to do that.
Yeah.
And you want to find other people that resonate with that.
Right.
And like it sounds like with your Olympians. And of course, we get an opportunity to work with a lot of great people because of and it wasn't because we were fortunate. I mean, I grew up poor in a single wide trail in the swamps of Florida, man. And so a lot of people will say that, well, you're fortunate and you get to go hang out with these people. Why? It's because I've sharpened that pencil every single day of my life, just like those guys and gals have. And so it just so happens that we get to meet and have things in common. And I know I have a good community of people around me if things go bad. But it doesn't mean that everybody else can't do that either, because I've always had that community. Even on the farm as a poor kid, I knew all my neighbors.
Yep.
I'd milk their cows for them. I'd fix their fences for them. And without even asking, I'd see a cow tear down a fence, and I'd go over and start fixing it with my barbed wire, and the neighbors would reciprocate.
Yep.
They would. My dad would say, "Hey, I'm going out of town for a day." A hurricane season. Like right now, I lived through 83 hurricanes growing up. I think if I calculate for all the years I lived in Florida.
Yeah.
And it was fun. When the 70-mile-per-hour winds would come, we'd be outside trying to fly. and of course,
that explains your hobbies today.
Okay, it makes sense. I never thought about that. But my dad would leave. He would be gone for 2 weeks at a time. I wouldn't see him. And I would just be like, well, Dad's working. No, Dad was out saving millions of people's lives by getting their power back on because he worked for a power company after he got out of the military. But we had to have the community because a lot of the men worked for trade jobs, and they'd be out fixing things that were broken. And it was us, the kids and moms at home on the farms taking care of things. So we had to have that community. And it is sad to see that a lot of that is failing. Even in some of the farmland communities of today, there's no more communities. So let alone in the cities, man, there's a big problem there.
Yeah. I mean, I think people used to just grow up and stay in their hometown, and it was generational. Where that really struck me actually is when I went to California and I was going to go to a high school football game on a Friday night, and there was like 30 people in the stands. Well, where I'm from, stands are full,
Packed.
right? Because it's hometown pride, because everybody's from there. They stay there. This is like community pride. In a place like Newport Beach, maybe 5% of the people actually grew up there, right? It's transient. So there isn't that community. It's just the nature of our culture. And it's not like people are bad or they've gotten worse or anything. It just is what it is. But if you're going to think about this as it applies to what we're talking about today, you kind of got to overcome that and kind of hit it head on and start making some connections, because those things are going to matter. I think.
I agree. Yeah. Even if you don't like your neighbors, that's good to know. Yeah.
Well, we were talking about that today. I mean, what if I just kept to myself and I didn't know that you were my neighbor? Some things popped off. Like, boy, I tell you what, I can tell you firsthand, I'd rather have Travis as a neighbor and know that and be able to reach out than the opposite, and have that resource 50 yards away and have no idea it was there. Right. I mean, I'm not saying you have to hang out with everybody every Sunday, but it's good to take a little roll call and just talk to people and introduce yourself and know what they do for a job. And, maybe if you've got a doctor on your street, maybe you've got a guy that builds custom homes. I mean, you just never know when this stuff's going to come in handy. And, we go back to community. Like, it's just good to keep tabs on that stuff and stay close.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people ask me, how do you get to know your neighbors better in today's world? And it depends on the neighborhood. Like you said, culturally, it's going to be different. I don't think I would probably, if I still lived, like when I lived in San Diego and lived in some other cities on the beach, I probably wouldn't say, hey, house party open, let's get to know the neighbors, because you wouldn't have any of your neighbors there. Right. So you got to be careful before you just throw out a party. But my neighborhood, I could do that now. Now that I've settled, I'm older, I finally bought my first house in my life. I have a lot of neighbors, and I don't know them very well because we just moved in there a year ago, and I've been trying to get to know them. So I came up with this idea that happened in the past was doing these fall time, winter time First Friday. So every first Friday of the month, we put out on people's doorsteps or whatever, just a little letter. Hey guys, we're hosting a little block party, and this first Friday party, and you come in, and now you get to understand who your neighbors are, good or bad, right? Because that's good to know. Because the last time we did that, my kids were like, I didn't even know there was kids my age on the street. Like, boom, that's something completely different. And now they're building their own little communities on the side. So that's a really good way to start that. You know, and that's been working for us. And then all of a sudden people go, well, oh, what do you do? And then like, oh, well, they know they could call me, and I want my neighbors to know that. Right. Where a lot of guys in my community will be like, I'm not telling my neighbors who I am. Like, well, okay, then you're not a community guy. You're not helping with the skill sets that you have learned, used, and executed on in your life to help your country, but you're telling me you won't help your neighbors because you don't want them to know who you are? Okay, good luck with that. But that's just bravado bullshit in my opinion. So
yeah, I mean, you're never going to acquire all the skills you're going to need for everything, but 10 people get 10 times as many, right? Like Absolutely. I said, if you got a construction worker and you've got a doctor and you've got somebody that's a horticulturist or something, you know what I mean? Like, let's just say worst case scenario. Now you've got a little community that can start helping each other out. I mean, it's just easy, man.
Well, it's like we were talking earlier, there's no such thing as like the Jason Bourne concept, right? There's this, like the military. The military is a community. In my team, I had a community. I had a guy that understood all about communications. I had the medical guy that understood all things about medical. I had the guy that was, all the leadership and command and control and skill sets there, and then weapons experts and survival experts and all this other stuff. That's a community. Right. But we sometimes even forget that when we get out. And so I'm like, well, let's rebuild that. That's what we have here in this company. If something ever happened, then this company and all of its employees, which is quite a bit, would jump to the chance to help each other. Right. And that's the people I want to surround myself around, just like you said.
Right.
I'm sure we could talk about that forever.
We could talk about all this forever.
Get to know people, and a lot of people aren't doing that today because I think COVID is a big problem with that. One of the big problems where now you isolate people in their homes for 2 years in quarantine. Now people are kind of used to that. And so they don't even care about going out because they think, well, I survived for 2 years by myself. I don't need anybody else.
Yeah. There's a lot of like mental habitual things that happen when you get in those situations, and whether that's, designed or not, it definitely pulls at the seams of culture and of friendships and of community, like when you're being told to stay and everybody might get you sick, every person you see. I mean, there's some weird psychological stuff going on with that. But on the flip side, when COVID hit, I I didn't know what was going on. A lot of people didn't know what was going on. You know, you're getting these like, hey, we're shutting the town down. And I talked to my neighbor, Brian, who lives up the hill from me. And we're in an area in Park City where there's a lot of construction going on. There's bulldozers and there's, you know, skid steers and payloaders and everything everywhere. And Brian works in construction. And I was like, hey, dude, got keys for any of that stuff? You know, like, you know, I gave him one of my walkie-talkies. He's up the hill. Like, I literally didn't know what was going to happen, but it was like, let's just talk about what if, right? Like we could pull one of those on the road and at least we block off our community. Like I didn't know. I mean, you hear all these crazy things and
so he had all the keys.
And then there's only a couple, you know, for like a lot of these things. Right. So it's like, you know, like Polaris snowmobiles, I think there's 4 keys for all the snowmobiles, you know? So it's kind of something like that, but he's like, yeah, I can, you know, here's what we're going to do if something crazy. And it was a 2-minute conversation. I'm not saying I'm like a total conspiracy theorist or paranoid, but we were just like, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if, you know, we're going to do this, we're going to act this way. And just, it was nice to know you had somebody else looking out for you.
It's hard to be a conspiracy theorist nowadays when considering all the conspiracies have come true.
Conspiracy theorist or fortune teller.
Right. Well, I mean, COVID is whether people want to agree with this or not after a few years now, it was absolutely unequivocally without a doubt a 5th generation warfare weapon system. Sorry, you can argue with me all you want. It is, right? It's gain of function research. What is that? Just study what that is. So regardless of what we know about the facts, it was somebody trying to harm somebody else through these gain of function. And it doesn't matter what it was. It matters that it happened. So it literally happened to us. And we'll sit there and argue about, well, how it happened and this and that. Like, no, what are you doing to prepare yourself? Because what did everybody do immediately when we found out there was immediate supply chain shortages? Everybody starts running out going crazy, you know, and then the whole toilet paper concept that we laughed about, that's sad, you know. And I remember we even made joke, right? We made joke videos about this, dude. We were clearing the building and stuff and like taking toilet paper from people with guys in full kit, night vision and stuff. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, that's actually bad because this is toilet paper is becoming a symbol of what our society is. That's what people went out and grabbed first.
Well, you know? I remember, I don't know if you remember this, when they shut down, we did like a Facebook Live, you and I, because I wanted your perspective on this. You're a lot closer to the stuff than I am, right? And I think we had talked actually a week before. So like before things started happening, I'd talked to you and I talked to a couple other friends that in our roles similar to yours, and everybody was saying the same thing from different areas of the country. And I actually did like, you know, on Instagram, you can have like your stories, and then you can have your stories to your close friends. Like to my close friends, I was like, hey guys, I don't know what's going on, but I'm hearing all this stuff and like, go prepare, like go get some groceries, like just like spend $200 extra this week and just, I don't know what's going on, but I'm just telling you, like, that's what I'm going to do. I told my team, like, hey, we're going to cut out early today. I want you guys to just go take care of yourselves. I don't know what's happening. And I literally last week, a girl reached out to me and she's like, I just wanted you to know, like, I saw that and I thought you were insane. And she's like, everything you said happened. She's like, just tell me next time and I'm going to listen. But, you know, thank you for that. So that's awesome. It's one of those weird things, right? Where it's like, it's hard to even believe what's coming out of your mouth sometimes, but boy, you know, if COVID was anything, I mean, it should have been a practice round for all of us in our preparation, right? Like a lot of people got caught without toilet paper, they had to run to the grocery store and get more, like, why are you not now ahead of that?
Yeah.
For whatever's coming next.
And do you think there's something coming next?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the nature of the world,
right?
At the very basic level. I mean, are you going to ask me, is nothing ever going to happen again, or is something going to happen? I'm pretty sure something's going to happen.
I think anybody would be kind of almost foolish to say that nothing will ever happen like that again. I think that was a failed experiment, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Again, not conspiracy driven, but it was. If it was a weapon system that was designed to be, you know, a world population control, like one of the biggest conspiracies right now with the World, you know, Economic Forum stating that their objective by 2023 is to reduce the world's population by half.
That video is wild.
That's out there. People are laughing and clapping about this. So with that, now we know that COVID killed some of the supply chains and all the wars and things that are going on. Russia, the fertilizer plants, you know, top 3 distributors in the world of food externally to America because we're the best, can't get fertilizer, can't get food. So what does that mean? Well, now scientists are saying that starting this month, you're going to start seeing worldwide famine happening. And by the end of next year, they're saying that over 1 billion people will die from starvation and mass famine around the world.
That's mind-boggling.
Specifically in Africa, Middle East, and in Southeast Asia countries. Again, we're the #1 distributor of food in the world. America's an anomaly, right? We have 2 beautiful coastlines and imports and exports. We have 3 really with the southern side. We're an anomaly with all the different agriculture and everything that we have here. So of course everybody wants that. And, but that's scary to know that the rest of the world might be, subject to this potential goal of the World Health or the World Economic Forum leaders saying that, yeah, we're going to reduce the world. But what are you trying to play God because you think that the world's overpopulated or that humans were going to destroy the world? Well, look, yeah, we just might.
Yeah.
But it ain't your job to play God.
Well, and I'd even say whether that comes true or not, I think we saw how fragile our whole society is, right? How fragile supply chains are and how quickly things can change. I think we haven't had something like that in the past where it was like, overnight you're being told to stay in your house and there's new guidelines just almost just dictated down on us. And so that can happen again because it just happened. Yeah. So like, I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm just saying if somebody at home's like, nah, it's not like, but look what just happened. Like at least plan for what just happened because it can happen because it did.
Well, that's what I want to try to prevent is people from thinking that, like this lady that said, I thought you were crazy. No, she thought you were paranoid. Yeah. Where you're more prepared because you've seen things. You've been around the world, man. You've worldly traveled, and a lot of people that aren't can't fathom what some of these horrible, terrible, catastrophic situations in other countries that on a daily basis, like right now, the conflict map, there's, the mass graves in Ukraine right now. People don't see that. They just see Ukraine and Russia fighting, right? They don't see the starvation. They don't see the death, the people that have no insulin, no ability to, all that stuff that, imagine how many people would die in that case. It's happening, but we just don't have a lens into that window unless you've been there. And so when a lot of times we come back and go, hey, everybody, you got to be careful because this might happen to us. They're like, you're crazy, man. This is America. That won't happen here. Okay, good luck with that at this point. Maybe 10 years ago I'd have kept my mouth shut, but now it's like we do have to be prepared. So when we have our organizations that we own and operate, we're not trying to do it because we're trying to scare people. We're doing it because of life preservation. That's our entire job. That's why we put the training, the knowledge, the equipment out there for people so they can be predator prepared when a worst case scenario hits. Right. And creating a community with that. Like, and
what's the downside to preparing? I mean, really, a little bit of money. I mean, you know what I mean? Like
some people go crazy.
Well, but I really believe that you can economically significantly change your position. You know, it doesn't take building a 4,000 square foot bunker. It doesn't take buying a new vehicle. There's just a handful of things you can do. So if this happens again, you've got a head start. And sometimes a head start's all you need, to make it or not.
And there's a lot of those people out there that do have the bunkers. They do have the overland vehicles. They do have all the crazy stuff in the world. They're prepared for the worst case, nuclear, biological, national disaster, et cetera. And people will go, they're crazy until it happens.
Maybe.
And they're going to be the best off people. Just like that, going back to that lady saying, wow, I should have listened to you. Yeah. I'm not saying you got to go crazy like that. And we're not saying that, and that's why I think you took more of a simple solution, a KISS method solution to helping the people that don't understand, because you don't need to sell to me. I'm already there, right? Yeah. I'm already in that early adoption of preparedness and survival, just because my career and all the things that I grew up with, hurricanes and being on the farm and things going wrong. And that's why I can add to that versus somebody who's like, I don't even know how to start a fire. I don't even know how to change a tire on a car. I don't even know what I would do if my power went out for 2 weeks at a time. Like that's what we're talking about mostly here. So with that, after the community, going into more of the individual side, your second thing you talked about was mental and physical preparedness. Yeah. What's your idea there?
I don't care how fit you are. You can always be better. You can be the strongest guy. You can be the fastest guy. Like I really think you're either going forward or backwards. And for me, I've experienced this firsthand. I train every day, for two reasons, really. One, like, there's a lot of times my buddies will call and be like, hey man, we're going to go do this awesome thing. And I want to be able to do it. I don't want to be like, I'm out of shape. I can't go do this thing. But it's also preparing you for if you need that stuff for an emergency situation. I mean, I've had a lot of times where I've, wrecked a snowmobile or got a truck stuck, and maybe it's 5, 6, 7 miles to get to something, and it's no problem. It's no problem. I'm in shape. I can do it. I can get there. Or I've had people, they're injured. I've been able to help carry them. Like my dog last winter, he cut his leg. We were backcountry skiing. A buddy ran into him, gashed his leg open. I was able to make a tourniquet with our little first aid kit I had with. I threw him on my shoulders and skied down. He's a 115-pound dog. I was sore for a week, but I did it. And he's my best friend, like I'm a single guy, like that's my family. So if I was out of shape, that wouldn't have happened. He would have died on that mountain. So yeah. I just always go back to.
You would have felt like shit if you wouldn't have been able to do that.
Can you imagine every day waking up and being like, I was too fat to save my dog. And he just looked me in the eye, like that's heavy. Like for any dog person out there, they're probably tearing up already. That's like an old Yeller thing, So from the physical standpoint, that's
now a human. Now replace that. No disrespect, because dogs are life to people, right? They're kids, but now replace it with a 200-pound human, an adult. Now get down the hill. Yeah, you still can. You'll figure it out no matter what. Because now you're even more motivated.
Yeah, you'll figure it out. In my
opinion,
you'll figure it out. And on the mental side, we were talking about this with shooting and everything else, and I was just elk hunting, and you're running up a mountain, your heart's pounding, and then you have to make really strategic decisions and make a good shot. And being in those situations, those pressure situations, I think the quote is like, you'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a garden in a gardener in the war. Yeah. And it's like you want to practice for those things. You want to be sharp. You want to be ready and be able to take those things on, because man, if it's life or death, you get one chance. And you said, oh, I don't know my dope right now. I wish I would have trained harder. Like you train a lot, man. I'm sure most high achievers probably feel that way, even though they've trained 1,000 times more than most people. But you can never like overtrain. I don't think
it's hard
from a mental perspective.
Because you could get into a very dangerous habit there of saying like, I'm not good enough. I'm never good enough. I'm never good enough. And we keep going harder and harder and harder. So that there's a good balance there you have to have. Yeah. And a lot of military guys, as you probably encountered, will have that that savior complex, where it turns into literally a complex, almost an issue that stops you from excelling, because you're constantly saying, man, I gotta be better. I gotta be better. And it makes you go the opposite direction. So like it's a balance of opposites there. And you got to realize that don't kill yourself. But at the same time, I think you said it earlier, the mountain doesn't care.
Yeah. So, that's one of my favorite. I think it's like a campaigns thing. Like the mountain doesn't care. It's true. It's like, you're just going to push against things, and it's not going to give you a break because you weren't prepared, So I think about that stuff.
Well, I think you also, like when you hunt, when you get out and you ride your bike, when you hike, when you're out there doing things in the environment, you're also off-gassing. You're also balancing yourself from this crazy-ass world that we live in as well. And I don't think people do that enough. And so I think people go hunting and then hiking and biking. That's all crazy stuff. I'm comfortable in my world here in this. And no, maybe you should balance them more and find more opportunities to become more situationally aware. Like talking about mental fitness as well is critically important, not just the physical aspect of it. And a lot of people will say, well, we're not Olympians. We're not studs. We're not military special operations guys. So you can't just tell us to go out and get in shape. No, it's not us that's going to tell you. It's the mountain one day is going to tell you it doesn't care.
It's your decision.
And you're going to want to wish, you're going to wish you at that point in time, like I said earlier, that you were the best dude in the world or best female in the world at what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah, it's like more people in what I see and, across my 47 years being on this earth is, people don't carry a load enough anymore, so meaning like putting that dog on your shoulders, putting that elk on your shoulders. I mean, how much weight are you pulling out? And that you had no guides, you had nobody with you. You out by yourself and you hunt and you carry this shit on all by yourself.
Yeah.
Most people don't do that.
No, man. I mean, listen, I have nothing against people that use guides or go to, stocked ponds, if you will. But, there's something really proud about going out by yourself and getting it done and carrying that thing off the mountain. And, I will tell you, if we went tonight and had steak somewhere in town here and somebody left half a steak on the plate, I'm going to take that steak home because like meat looks different, because once you've earned it and once you've realized the sacrifice in making something like that happen, everything looks different. Right. And I think that's the way you should live, right? You should honor the struggle and you should respect nature and you should push yourself. It's it's a whole can of worms for me, man. But yeah, that's good stuff.
I imagine like 100 years from now, people are like, and you could travel to the future and like, oh my God, you're from the past. What was meat like?
Yeah, right.
And you're like, what do you mean? Like,
what did
you do with it? Well, we didn't eat it all. We left it on plates and we just let it sit there. I saw a comedy skit like one time about water. It was hilarious like that. But I think people go, well, how do I maintain, do I have to go work out every day, 2 hours a day? Like some people can't. So what do you tell the person that has a medical disability? And I think, well, shit, I guess Tyler was just here last week, right? Or 2 weeks ago with the last Tyler Vargas from the Marine that was blown up in Afghanistan. And they told him, and he talks about this in the podcast. If you guys I'm not going to get into a long drawn out story, but they told him the reason why he stabilized and was able to survive is because of the shape he was in. He was a monster. And where a lot of people will have that much trauma on their body and won't, he remembers everything. He was conscious the entire time with no arm and no leg and 25 ball bearings blasted through his body all over the place. So that's huge. It's not okay to be in shape. It's necessary when you're in those types of situations. And I'm not going to go out and every morning when I wake up, I'm not getting up and running because I'm worried about something bad happening, because I really enjoy taking care of myself, because it makes me a better version of myself so I can help other people in those bad situations.
There's a lot of science around the mental improvements you'll see from physical activity. I mean, there's a ton of research. My buddy Michael Easter has a book called The Comfort Crisis that digs deep into that and the effects of nature. And that's a book everybody should read. I mean, I think we're living in a skin suit designed for the natural world, and we're living in a digital world, and there's a disconnect there. There's some tension and some friction. And I think it's really important to find balance. And I'm not telling people to hate their lives and go to the gym every morning. I'm just saying, like, man, get out and breathe and sweat and feel better, improve yourself.
I don't think you'd be able to tolerate yourself if you don't do those things.
I can't tolerate myself if I get 2 days without it. Right. I mean, it's almost addicting.
Well, JP says that a lot. He's like, lift a load, man, so you can tolerate yourself. Like, so you know what you're capable of.
Right.
You know what your left and right lateral limits are of life. What about mental? Like, what are some things that people can do for mental performance?
Gosh. Again, there's so much, and it you can't be an expert at everything, but I do believe in putting yourself in stressful situations, even, mentally, like trying to figure things out, trying to solve for things, make things hard on yourself. Like back to that book with Michael, I think it's like 2% of people given the option would take the stairs over the escalator. It's a mental decision that I'm going to actually make this a little harder than it has to be.
And they stop. They don't move. They don't walk on the escalator. I'm sorry, that bothers me.
No, I know it's wild, right? But like, just take the stairs, man. But you can apply that to everything. It's like, instead of calling AAA to change your flat tire, it's a nice sunny day and you're not in a hurry, like figure it out. Like what's the worst? You lose an hour and then you call AAA. Like just continue to push yourself to try to figure things out and solve for things and maybe give yourself a little stress. And I think that all adds up. It's cumulative and it's like they say, like motion is lotion, right? Like you keep moving, you keep exercising. And I think that it sets you up for success when something is really important.
Yeah. It's like you experienced upstairs problem solving in the simulator.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I first time in there, didn't know what to do. And it was I like literally you put me in like the most basic situation. You said I did a really bad job with it and I can't wait to read. No, I know, but it wasn't great. I mean, but I told you, I'm like, that was a moment in my life where now I would think of that situation completely different after going through that than I did before. Like I'd never been in a simulator. I've never been in a situation where somebody was getting jacked at an ATM and had a gun. And so when I got done, you said, well, did you think about this? And what about that? And why didn't you do this? And that's going to stick with me now. And I guarantee the next time I walk up to an ATM, I'm going to think about those things.
Most people say I'll never go to an ATM again in my life.
But that's important, right? Like you want those reps. The example I gave you was my buddy he's a professional BMX rider. He does like flatland tricks. And he was in China and he told me he was riding his bike along and there's some little kids and he just stopped and he did like one of those like flatland spinny tricks. And he's like, I watched those kids' heads explode. Like they just thought that all you could do with a bicycle is sit on the seat and pedal. But now they know that like there's a Pandora's box of options with that thing.
They're doing it.
And their lives are different from now on. So those
What
are
did he
the
say?
things
He
that are
said
important.
those kids will never look at a bike again, or
The
something.
same way. Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the same, I think, like you mentioned earlier, if somebody was to just take the time and change their tire, especially if they've never done it before,
Mhm.
you will look at that differently the rest of your life.
Right.
So it's the practical application of actually doing it. And I think that's what today's world, it's easy to pick up a phone and just fix the problem right away.
That's causing dependency,
of course,
at a massive
it's
scale.
a lack of self-reliance.
Right.
And, I was mentioning like my kid started driving and, it's hard to, like you said, it's hard to teach everything, to somebody. And he opens up the back seat and says, Dad, what's this thing back here eventually? Like a month or two into driving. I'm like, that's the jack, son. He's like, I said, you don't know what that is? He's like, no. How do you use it? I'm like, let's change the tire.
Yep.
And then he'll never look at that jack the same again, and then now when he drives down the road and sees somebody that may need help, that he can identify that needs help. In today's world, we got to be careful with just stopping, but he can say, you know what, I know how to do that. And I can share that with somebody else and then maybe they'll look at it differently.
Right.
So I think that goes back to the community concept. So all these things are kind of intertwined together. But I think also mental visualization training is important. We teach that a lot in our courses, is visualize something. Just visualize a scenario and then visualize yourself in it and visualize what you would do with it.
When I go on hunts, if I'm going to the Arctic Circle, like I remember I was going to the Arctic Circle on a grizzly hunt and never hunted grizzlies, never been in the Arctic Circle. Well, every morning on the treadmill, in the months leading up, I was watching hunting videos in the Arctic Circle for grizzlies. And guess what? When I landed, I knew the landscape. I knew how animals generally reacted. I knew the temperature, there's data points. It's like I solved for, call it maybe 30% of the whole thing. So when the moment came to actually like really get into it, I wasn't overwhelmed, right? I already figured out part of it. And that's a really easy thing to do. Again, we're not asking people to like completely change their lives. Just like start stacking some skills and making yourself better, whatever that is, like 1% at a time.
Yeah. And you're using technology to do that. You're watching videos on your phone, on YouTube or whatever, wherever you're at, and trying to visualize and try to find some relevance when you get there. And I think that they're using VR for that stuff now. I know you can go on, they have maps of cities laid out. So you can literally walk through Paris, I guess. I don't know exactly what they're doing, and then they'll send people there and they're seeing, the University of San Diego actually did this study. They took 2 psychologists and one, they wore this mobile EEG system where it maps their brain and checks the brain wave development of what they're doing. And they put the one psychologist through VR and then they sent him to it was the aircraft carrier down in San Diego, the museum.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And they sent him through it. And they said, hey, you just did it in VR. Now you're going to go there and we want you to hit those same checkpoints inside the VR that you did, but in reality. And they're going to map him. So they mapped his brain, what was happening. And then they did it in reverse with another psychologist. And they made him go through the real thing. And then they put him under VR and he went through it. And both the maps were exactly the same between both people, whether they were in VR or in the real thing. It was very similar to them. So they were saying that, and that's scary too, because now nobody people are actually going to go to the place, which is the problem. So like what you're doing is you're going to the place visually and then you're going and testing the hypothesis when you get there.
Right.
Same thing. We use these simulators, right? You just tested a hypothesis that, okay, I could have done that better. Because imagine if that was real. Well, now you'll look at that differently and you'll visualize it more.
Right.
And then more scenarios on top of that increases your mental problem solving. And, that's getting easier and easier to find nowadays.
You're improving your odds, you're just improving the outcome.
Yeah.
You may not be 100% perfect, but going through reps, it's just reps, right? It's like, it's practice, and practice makes you better.
Well, we were talking earlier about, the shooting aspect, which of course we do a lot of that. I tend to tell my students, stop stuffing shooting into your life. Because you'll hear them say like, I'm bad. Yeah. I haven't seen you in a year and you haven't really fired a gun all year long. It's like, well, you had 3 or 6 days of amazing opportunity to build this model and then continue that until I see you again.
Yeah. And
they come back and they say, well, I just don't have time, man. Family, job. I get it. Right. But could you have done something else in your life? So I say, stop stuffing this course into your life. Stop. I got to get to the range. I got a box of ammo. I got to get to the range. Damn it. I couldn't get to the range. You're just trying to stuff it in. Instead, put your life into your shooting. So I think it's the same thing with this, put survival into your life, right? Don't stuff it in there, but everyday things you could do. So mental awareness, physical awareness, meaning spatial awareness, right? So I need to know what's around me at all times. Walking up to a door, as I give an example, every time I go up to that door, I look over my shoulder, not for something bad, but for somebody else that might need help. I'm always in service to other people. And every time I walk up to that door, as my dad taught me, because he'd put a boot in my ass if I didn't do it. So he's teaching me to be a gentleman, but what I realized over my life is actually he's teaching me situational and spatial awareness, because every time I go up to that thing, I stop and take a second to look behind me to go, okay, nobody needs help. Nobody's trying to kill me. There's not some, maybe an elderly person that needs help opening the door.
Yep.
That could be hundreds of thousands of times in my life that I put my life now back into my shooting. So when I step on the range, guess what? I'm more situationally and spatially aware, and I'm safer. Right. And that's because I did that every day in my life. So I don't want people to think that they have to go to a survival course. They have to buy all this equipment. They can literally in their lives just kind of work on these little tiny things every single day.
Back to that point, last weekend I was in Aspen, Colorado. Most people walk around with their heads in their phones, right? I was walking home from dinner, and like those like plastic newspaper holders you'll see along like a sidewalk. I'm walking and I just hear a bink, and I looked and I saw a berry fall and hit the thing, and I looked up and there was a black bear 4 feet above me in the like literally straight above me, eating berries on one of the main streets in Aspen. And I told my friends, like, hey, like, back up, other people were coming up like, hey guys, go around. I mean,
how many people didn't see that?
I wonder how many people just cruise by, checking Instagram, and literally like death from above.
And you only knew because you heard the sound of a berry hitting a plastic.
Well, I had my head up. I wasn't looking at my phone. I was just walking down the street, looking around. It was nighttime, just kind of enjoying myself generally, but head on a swivel, right? I didn't expect a black bear to be, literally, I could have high-fived him. I mean, he was that close.
Yeah.
And, it's just our world, we're so ingrained into like our phones and the digital world and situational, spatial awareness, just looking around, taking things in. We had breakfast this morning. We both kind of picked a table away from the door with our backs to the wall. I was like, that's what I always do. I hate sitting with my back to the door.
And again, a lot of people say, dude, you're paranoid. You're not always going to get attacked at every place you go. It's like, no, well, first off, that's subconscious. We didn't consciously really think about that. I don't believe we just kind of sit that way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if I'm the last to because I've got guys like this, we'll do classes and we'll go out to dinner and stuff. And then there'll be people fighting over the chair, the defensive chair, whatever you want to call it. And they'll be like, Travis, do you want to sit there? I'm like, no, I don't care. Sit down, man. Have a good time. Like, but your back's to the door. I'm like, I don't care. Like, well, what happens if something happens? I'm like, well, first off, uncertainty is never a problem that should ever be solved. And the problem with you always trying to be so certain in your life about what's going to happen is going to drive you batshit crazy.
Right.
And so we have to find that balance there a little bit. But that's the thing. Like, I think as adults, if we're all adults here listening, I think it's pretty easy for us to discipline ourselves to take our head out of our ass for a second and put the phone down and walk down the street and enjoy Aspen, number one, especially if you're there.
Right.
Or to enjoy every place that you are. And I think the biggest problem is kids. Our kids are not being taught the self-reliance. And that's a part of it for me. Because I'll see my kids in their rooms, on their computers, right? Because everybody's a gamer nowadays. Mm-hmm. And I'll see them get up and grab their phone and then go to YouTube and walk to the kitchen and get a drink. And they're walking back and their head never came out of a device the entire time. And if I see that, it doesn't happen much. But when I do, there's an instant, okay, it's time.
Yeah.
So I think, and I always say this, this quote, when you teach your kids, you teach your kids' kids. And I think that's where we come up, on the farmlands or, somebody. It didn't have to be your mom, it didn't have to be your dad, but it could have been neighbors, it could have been friends or mentors that taught us something that we'll pass that on to our own children. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the most important thing for not just us as adults here, but the communities that are coming up behind us. We've got to share these things with them because it's falling apart and the world's getting worse.
Oh,
so,
for sure.
As far as, again, mental and physical fitness, we could talk about that all day long, right? Yeah. And especially as it pertains to the physiological aspects of what now happens under stressful situations. And I think that's important to remember from a survival standpoint as well, which I know, we briefly discussed earlier, the rules of three concept, mental acuity, mental fitness. if you crash your car in, let's say, going around a corner in Aspen or Telluride, or because, some of the places up there, they'll shut down the roads in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
And you might even go into the long stretch and they'll shut it down behind you, which has actually happened to me a few times when the blizzard comes in. Well, you crash your car and they shut down both gates. Nobody's coming for you until that storm's up.
Yep.
So what are you doing at that point? In the typical rules of 3, for people that don't know, is 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 hours without warmth or shelter, 3 minutes without oxygen, right? From fires in your camp to calving, rocks and things like that, avalanches. Mm-hmm. And then they typically stop there. But nobody talks about 3 seconds. And 3 seconds, I believe, is the most important. Coming back to the mental aspect here, is in 3 seconds you can lose a positive mindset by saying, oh my God, I'm going to die. And I've heard that before. I've heard that in combat. I've heard that in some certain survival situations. And if you say that, you can say bye-bye to the rest of the rules of 3. Right, because you're not going to go find shelter, warmth, or water. I don't care about food right away. When your mindset is not there. So that's why I like to visualize those things happening. So like when we teach our actual survival courses, that's the first thing we focus on. Is in that situation, you're going to have a very big challenge with yourself. That's when adversity is going to introduce you to who you are. Yep. And at that point, if your mindset's not on, none of this other stuff matters. So I think that's, again, kind of like capping on that.
I've read millions of, articles on survival and everything. And it's amazing how many say the most important thing is a positive mental attitude, right? I mean, that really is a game changer. I mean, there's statistics around everything from fighting cancer to, overcoming anything. It's just like your mind controls so much. It's actually something I thought a lot about when we built our products. If you open up one of our bags, there's really clear instructions. There's color coordination on pockets. And my idea was, if you can make one good decision, you're feeling a little bit better about your situation. And then if you make another one, you feel a little bit better and your adrenaline starts to slow down. And then the clouds kind of clear out and you can actually start thinking, right? Because a lot of people get into fight or flight and they're just going to make a bad situation worse. Mm-hmm. But if you can get down the right path right away, I really believe that that's a path to a good result, versus the other direction. So that's a huge thing, man. I mean, it's funny how many times people just want to give up on something. They want to say it's too hard. And the mind quits way before the body needs to even think about it, you know?
And that's things I look for. Like when I look at your product, I notice everything, even on the front of the outer bag here. And we'll show this in B-roll for people on the YouTube channel, but you have air, shelter, water, and it's literally printed on the outside of the bag. And then on the inside of the bag is a whole damn story about it. And I think what's great about that, because a lot of the hardcore survival experts would look at that and go, dude, I don't need any of that information. I know how to use this stuff. Well, it ain't for you, number one. Or maybe it is, because when your ass is in a horrible situation and your mindset is not on and you're thinking with a negative thought performance interaction, you're creating more frustration, more disappointment, more fear, more anger. Yeah. And all that comes from is a lack of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
A lack of knowledge is what creates and breeds fear, as the old saying, right? And then fear breeds hatred, and then hatred breeds destruction. So I think if you go back to like when we're designing a product, how self-explanatory is it? Well, it's pretty explanatory. Even on the water bottle, you have how to boil. Well, I know how to boil water. Not when you're seeing chaos all around you and you're freezing to death and your family's relying on you. You might just want to have some knowledge so you have less fear. And the next thing you can actually act. So that's where that positive mentality comes back in, because of a little bit of knowledge. I thought that was cool that you did.
Well, and how many times thinking back to like college, you study and you study and you study and you memorize things. And then you get into the test and you read the same question you've been studying and you're like, man, which one is it? You know what I mean? So like, what's wrong with a little bit of just like, oh yeah. Okay. Step 1, check. Step 2, check. Okay. Yeah. I know I'm doing this right. I'm feeling better about this. I'm not, I'm sure we've all been there in a different aspect. So I just really like the idea of having kind of a trusted voice, just kind of guiding you. I mean, if you got it, you got it.
Yeah.
But if you've got 2% of uncertainty, why not just have it there? So that's how we think about it.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, that's the third thing here is resources, right? That you talked about. And resources can be huge, right? I mean, it is huge. Everything that's on the gear that you put out, what we put out, it's like, it's a lot of stuff. So where do we start with resources?
Boy, I mean, that's a can of worms. I think what I think about is like stages, right? So you've got your home, and then you've got your car, and then you've probably got, a campsite call, and then you've got what is on your person when you're doing whatever. I mean, for me, it kind of breaks down that way. So you can add mobility into that. You can add self-protection. You can add medical. But generally what I try to think about is what's the situation I'm in and what do I have around me? So if you're home, man, there's no excuse not to have the stuff you need. It always made me laugh during COVID when people are like, we're going to get through this. And, this is hard, but you're going to make it. It's like, you're being asked to sit on your couch where everything you own is within reach.
Mm-hmm.
Like pretty
It's
easy
not a
survival
bad thing.
situation,
Good point.
But if you're out in the mountains, and you're, like with my dog situation, like that little 130 gram first aid kit that I had in my pocket was enough to get the job done. Without that, I don't think it would have happened. So, man, gear is a can of worms. We could talk about mobility and different vehicles and bikes and skis. And we could talk about medical and, what you need and what you've trained for. We can talk about self-protection. I mean, you can pick the choose your own adventure on that one, man. But I think it really just comes down to, one of my favorite quotes is the best camera is the one in your hand. Right. And so I think it's the same for gear. You want to have proximity to whatever it is that you need. And that takes some planning based on maybe a medical condition. Maybe you're in a hot climate. Maybe you're in a cold climate. Maybe you're going to be in a place where there's a lot of animals. I mean, you have to build it for your life and for what you need, but it has to be intentional. It has to be thoughtful.
Yeah. Okay. Protection.
I feel like I should defer this one to you, man.
I think
we had this conversation, Dave, like shotgun, handgun. I mean, you should. I'll shut up here.
A lot of people, I think, instantly go to weapons. What weapons do I need to protect myself in a situation? And yeah, that's a loaded question as well, even for me. But I mean, if you have the ability to carry every single day a firearm, why wouldn't you? Right. In today's world. And I get all the controversies and everything behind it, and the left versus the right now, and gun laws, this and that. But look, it is your ability to protect yourself, right? You have the ability legally to protect yourself.
That's right.
With good judgment, of course. And that's what we like to teach and it doesn't mean you absolutely have to have a weapon, because this is the best weapon, right? Your brain is the best up on the battlefield anywhere in the world.
Yep.
That's to me, that's so objectively true that makes me go back and really think about that mental fitness. And am I doing everything in my mind? For example, I'd love to share the concentric ring of security aspect. And what that means is, you have rings around you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the, a principle being protected, like everybody sees the Secret Service, there's the nucleus of guys that stand around that very important person. And you don't have to worry about them. You'll never see them. There's the whole days of Reagan getting shot and coming right up on them. It's not going to happen. We've learned our lessons from that. And if that happens, that somebody really screwed up really badly. Just like getting over the fence and getting into the Oval Office or whatever that dude was with the freaking, how is that even humanly possible? That was a failure on the Secret Service's side. Because their concentric rings of security failed. So if you look at your own home, for example, which right now you and I are not at our homes, we're here, right? So who's protecting your home? Well, is there somebody there with a gun right now? No, because we're here. But I know my family's home because it's they're out of school, all the kids are there, Bertoni's there. So who's protecting them? Now, my boys are pretty savvy, but they're not tacticians. They don't know how to communicate effectively to somebody yet that they may have to communicate to with a gun in their hand. They don't know how to do those things. So I want to prevent that from even happening by having concentric rings of security, meaning, do I have fences? Do I have alarm systems? Do I have, motion detectors? Do I have a little driveway chime? So when somebody pulls into my driveway, it goes to ding, and I'm like, hey, who the hell is, let me check look out the window, whatever. And I know I have a little bit of awareness. Or I see something, I get pinged on my camera systems, which are extremely cheap nowadays. Yeah. And I look at cameras well, I can't afford thousands of dollars. Don't, buy one every quarter, add a camera. So at the end of the year, you'll have 4 cameras on your house, with ring systems, and they all work. They're great. Those are concentric rings. Floodlights, night lights in your house, locking your doors, taking out the stupid little cheap strike plates on your doors and replacing them with the big $12 ones on Amazon, and put case hardened screws in there. Tighten up that garage door handle, put 3M laminate on your windows. Like, what do you mean 3M? Yeah, you can get ballistic laminate online, and you can hire people to put it in like 10 places, or you can do it yourself. Watch a video. You'll look at your house differently when you see that. And literally you can do all that for less than $1,000 if you wanted to, and secure a home. Use your alarm system, even if it's not monitored. Arm it every day, because that sound's going to go off. That's another deterrent in a concentric ring. Because while I'm here, I got to make sure those rings are in place for my family. That's not paranoid, because if something happened right now and I got a phone call, hey baby, somebody just tried to break into the house. What happened? They couldn't get in. All right.
Case closed.
Good talk.
Yeah.
I'll see you. What time's dinner? That's the conversation I want to have.
That's what you want to have.
Right. I want to wake up the next morning and walk out and walk the dog and look next door and see the cops at the neighbor's house and go, yes. Because mine's a hard target to get into. And it's not a fortress. It's just little things, because professional criminals don't like hard targets. They want an easy target. They want the easy window to get in. They want the easy garage door, coat hanger, red emergency handle pop. They lift, they steal everything you own. They close the door. You never even know how they got in. That's what they want. And if you have something worse than that, okay, now we have a problem. But hopefully I've got enough time, just like that Secret Service. You don't have to worry about those dudes. You got to worry about everybody that's in the crowds that you don't know who's carrying a gun, or the snipers, or the ISR and the cameras and all this other crazy seismic and magnetic sensors and shit that they use. It's like, it's in depth. So I take my military career, of course, my protective services career, and try to put that back into my own home, my own family. So I do that first, right? I didn't even say gun in there, did I?
Nope.
Do I still have guns in the house? Of course I do. So, and that's another whole loaded question for talking about the home situation, which you said home, car, backpack / campsite / or overlander / ADC everyday carry. What do I have on my body right now? I've got weapons in my home to defend my home. I use a handgun. I have 6 kids running around. I need something wieldable. I need to be able to grab kids. I need to be able to get on a phone and talk. I need to be able to defend, but I got to be proficient with that weapon system as well. So, somebody that's got 6 kids running around, and I'm running around with a shotgun with birdshot, probably not the best situation for me in my home. I want to be more precise, but that means I have to train. And so my proficiency, I trust. Somebody else that can't hit a target at 10 yards, don't shoot a handgun down your hallway at 25 yards,
Right.
When your kids are down there somewhere. And a lot of states have problems with this. Like, they can't legally put a gun in their car. They can't carry it everywhere they can. They can't even go camping or hiking with it. Where Arizona, it's a constitutional carry state, and you can carry a gun mostly everywhere you want to go.
Yeah, Utah as well.
Yeah, same with Utah and a lot of great states. And again, it's not the irresponsible people that we're worried about in our community, because we're mostly all responsible in our communities. It's the ones that don't care that they're trying to make laws around. I think another aspect of that is, if you can't have a gun on you, well, then what other skill sets do you have? Do you know how to use your bare hands? And this goes for everybody. Kids, my kids do jujitsu. They do a lot of, they're wrestlers.
Yep.
They're football players. They know how to make contact with people. Why? Because I'm teaching them to be monsters, but keep it in control. And of course, do dangerous shit carefully, right? Like we say. Right. Because I don't want my kids to live in a bubble. Like I think you said that earlier. Like, everybody's living in this like bubble,
nerfed up world. Yeah.
Nerfed up. Yeah, that's what you said. Nerfed up world. I want my kids to play with sharp, dangerous shit, so they don't become dull and stupid. Right. And I think that's where that has to start. And that means get them into martial arts. Do those things. But again, lift a load, man, so you can tolerate yourself. Because if you... Even me, like we were talking about with Trevor earlier, I'm not messing with that kid, man. He'll fucking wrap me up as a wrestler. So, and even with me doing 20 plus years of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I've seen him work on the mats. I'm like, all right, okay. Now I get to go faster. Now I get to get stronger and smarter. So I think all those things are incredibly important for self-protection.
Yeah. Let me add a big dog to that one, man. I mean, gosh, what's better than having a security system like that that's just part of the family that can hear and smell and see things long before you.
Yeah, we have a whole in our home defense classes, whole slide on dogs.
Yep.
Yeah. Even you when you rang the door this morning when you came to the house, what did you hear?
I heard
Viciousness. That's all I'm gonna say. No, it's friggin' a shit poo and a chihuahua, right? And they bark their asses off, and they only bark when somebody rings the front door. I'm okay with that. right? If they bark other times, they get scolded for that.
My dog is super friendly, but when he's home, he lays in a place where he can see out all the windows. He likes to lay up high.
Yeah.
And the minute anything looks off, he's got the loudest. I mean, nobody's going to come in the house with that bark. You know, it's a big dog, right? But it wakes me up. Or maybe I'm in my room working or downstairs. Like, I know if he's barking, I should come up and look because that's his job. He does it well. So,
And he's a pretty big boy.
Yeah, he's a big dog.
So somebody asked me, like, why do you have a Chihuahua? And I was like, it's my kid's dog. We actually got it in Park City when we were up there for the summer.
Oh, you did?
And I was like, it's my kid's dog. They're like, oh, I thought you had a Chihuahua because you were like a big preparedness survival guy. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, Chuyunga. I guess it's a Chihuahua like name for I don't know if it's the Aztecs or the Mayans that like breeded the Chihuahua.
Oh, this is new information for me.
I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, it means food that follows. And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, it's a very loyal dogs. Yep. They keep you warm at night. They love to cuddle. They're good little hunters, and they're food that follows. And I'm like, yeah, that's why I got a Chihuahua. Yeah. So
food that you mean like you'd eat it?
If you ever get hungry, you turn around and be like, hey, come here, man. And you got food that follows. Anyways.
Chihuahua tenderloins, pretty small.
So that's why I have a Chihuahua. But then you got into, besides self-protection, of course, which it's kind of like, and you have to have the ability to protect yourself in a bad situation. You have to.
Yep.
It's just like everybody's screaming about, like equality over freedom. Look, you can't have that. You cannot have that over freedom, right? Because if you think that's possible, you'll get neither. That's why you have to flip it, and you have to have security. You have to have the ability to protect yourself. You have to have the ability to set boundaries with people, because if you don't, you won't get anything. But if you do, you will have a high degree of both. And so I think if you want all these other things, the ability to store food, to use the energy systems that you have, to be able to bring the gear and stuff with you, you have to be able to have the ability to protect that. Right. So and again, resources are huge, right? And that's the last two things here, resources and resourcefulness. Those are two very different things. And I think people need to know the difference between those.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I think of resources, I think of like, when I talk about mobility, I've got my truck, I've got a side-by-side, if it's winter, I've got skis and snowshoes in the back. If it's summer, I've got trail shoes. I'm always thinking about movement, right? So that's gear, that's resources, right? Resourcefulness is like, can you find water? Can you find your way out of the mountains? Can you navigate an urban situation? Do you know how to hunt? Do you know how to fish? I know that sounds a little bushcrafty, and I usually don't go down that path, but I think these are real skills that really make a difference. And I think they teach you a lot about everything else as well.
Well, I think about, also if you mentioned like, okay, you got snow machines, you got snowshoes, you got skis, you got all that stuff. Those are all great resources to have until you don't have them. So now what do? That's where resourcefulness comes in, the MacGyver aspect, the ability to adapt to any given situation or acclimate to any given situation.
Even being able to operate them. Like a snowmobile in the backcountry of Utah can get stuck as fast as anything else if you don't know what you're doing. So there's, none of this is like a click button to fix it. There are skills and training and practice involved, but a lot of this stuff goes hand in hand. That's why I think those 4 pillars are really important.
Well, that's what I was about to say. It goes back to community there. Because I remember in the military, we'd be in a mountain situation, and I'm from Florida, right? So I never saw rock. I never saw snow. I never saw ice or mountains. Because I think Georgia was as far as I ever went north before I joined the Marine Corps. And then my first school I ever went to when I was 18 was Mountain Warfare School, Bridgeport, California, Sierra Nevadas. I loved it, man. I was like, this is the greatest thing in the world. And all the guys that are from there, like, you're an idiot, shut up, But I'll tell you, anytime we hit a crux in the mountains, we'd immediately go, hey, who's from the mountains? The community, like, like, hey, man, I'm from the Rockies. What's up? Like, hey, how do you deal with this? Here's how you do it, you know? So that's why I think, again, that goes back to that community aspect. And mobility is huge, right? Again, we're not trying to say, because this is where the overlanders and everybody's like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Like, we're not talking about you. We're not talking about you. We know, we trust you guys. You're the community that we're in. We know that. It's everybody else in the world that is having trouble understanding how to be prepared because how many people are calling you right now and say, dude, what do I do?
Yeah, I mean, that's how this whole thing started, right? People kept calling me like going, hey, the world's going crazy. I'm at ground zero. What do I do to prepare? And I was like, we were talking and I'm like, hey, we should talk about this because there's not there's not a, you know, the Amazon buy now button and you're solved. It's a complicated process, but you can start making progress that way. So yeah, I think about all this, man. I mean, I like a Tesla as well as anybody else, but maybe you want to have an e-bike in your garage as well. Or maybe it just comes down to, if you go to work every day and you're a woman, you're wearing high heels, like keep a pair of tennis shoes in there. Like what if you got to walk 7 miles home because, you know, there's an earthquake and the highway split? Like that's a totally different situation. If you're in some Nike Airs versus you're in some, you know, whatever, I don't know, girl shoes. So something that's not a tennis shoe, some kind of high heel or something, you know, like it's just,
or flip-flops. Like I was saying, you know, I don't wear flip-flops on an airplane.
Right.
You know why? Because when it's burning and I'm trying to get out of it, I don't want to be in flip-flops or trying to fight over people. Or like I was in Mexico recently, and I was telling you about that alley we were in, and Bertoni's like, I think I'm going to put my flip-flops on. I'm like, nope. And I started seeing people coming out like, hey, what are you doing in our alley? I'm like, let's just keep moving right now and keep your tennis shoes on for me. Well, why? Just trust me, you know? And so those are all really important things.
Yeah, it doesn't, again, we're not asking anybody to spend a ton of money or change their lives. It's just like, be a little thoughtful about what you're doing. You know, a gym bag of the right stuff could be more than enough to save your life in a lot of situations.
I'll tell you what this thing's great for is gifts. Yeah. I send this to a lot of people, and I know you told me that a long time ago, because now people get those things and they're like, damn, this is pretty cool. Nobody goes, why the hell did you send me a survival pack? Because I use the shit out of this thing for a lot of different stuff. Yep. Well, what's next, man, for you? You know, where are you going from here?
Man, we're on a mission to try to make the world a safer place. And, you know, I really believe we make great gear. I believe in what we're doing. For me, it's really getting the message out, you know, and just doing things like this, talking to guys like you, trying to help people. You know, I got to say those 39 trips to Iraq were like the most fulfilling time in my life. I felt like I was on a mission from God to make people smile. And when that all ended and I ended up in like this white corner office in Orange County, I've never felt like I was wasting my days, you know, more.
I was like, no purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. It just didn't feel, I'm like, I got one life. Is this what I really want to do? So, you know, when I started this company, like, look, I'm not Mother Teresa. I want to make some money. I want to go on heli ski trips. I want to go moose hunting. I want to do all that stuff, right? That costs money, but money's not enough. You know, I really wanted to leave a legacy and do something important. And this was the way I deemed I could do that best. And that's trying to help people solve for this. And I think there's never been another time in our lifetimes like it is right now. I mean, who knows what's going on in China and Russia, or maybe you do and you haven't told me, but like, who knows what's going on in China and Russia and when the next pandemic's going to hit. And we've got hurricanes, we have earthquakes, and that's just today, you know? So gosh,
well, I'm going to know, buddy, and I'll tell you something's about to happen.
Yeah. I mean, gosh.
And there is no tomorrow at the same time. So, like, what are you going to do about
that? We were having this conversation the other day. I'm like, I kind of wish some tanks would just roll in so I know what we're supposed to do. It's all this, like, speculative, you know, you hear these rumors. Like, it's frustrating. And I think that's what really unnerves people, right? Is they don't know what to prepare for. They don't know what's coming. And back to this, it's like, just start improving your position, whatever it is. If it just means getting in better shape, that doesn't cost any money, you know? If it means putting a first aid kit or a survival kit in your car, like, you don't know what the game changer is going to be, but if you start stacking these things, man, you're really changing your odds, in my opinion. And that's kind of my goal here.
Well, it's like the non-perishables, you know, like you could easily, I did that for a while on Amazon, you know, subscription service. I have, like, you know, I'm not going to sit there and spend because you can get like the $1,100 package and have it all in your basement like instantly, but like not many people can afford that, and that's not really realistic. So, but you can have a subscription where you bring in one bucket a month, you know, and by the end of the year, you've got a year's worth of shit.
Yeah, you know? or just keep like 2 weeks of food in your shelf and just eat through it. Just keep recycling it, right? Just that's your groceries. You're just buying 2 weeks ahead. Yeah. And then it's really no extra cost. You're investing a little bit more upfront, but if something pops off, you've got some elasticity before you have to really figure something out. And hopefully by then, you know, there's an answer for you.
Yeah. And it depends where you are in the world, I think, as well. Like for me here in this region of Arizona, it would be very hard for me, I think, you know, trying to visualize what would happen in a, worst case scenario, like power grid shuts down. Like that's a real thing. That's a real scenario. Power grids go down around the world all the time. You know, we're pretty lucky in America, but if it did, what's going to happen? No water, no food, no supply chain coming in. You're not allowed to leave. You're not allowed to stay. Yep. Like, it's like everything's confusing. And people are like, well, that'll never happen. Well, I've seen it literally happen multiple times in my life in foreign countries.
It happened
That's
during
why
COVID.
that's why I went there, to try to add some relief to the unrest, and try to help people realize, like, hey, we're here to support you and help you now. We're not going to have that in this country if something bad happens, but I can't stay here, and I've heard other guys on the internet that are survival experts say, like, hey, if something happens, just watch me. And when I grab my guns, that's the time to act. It's like, no, that's bullshit, because especially if you live up in the mountains, you're going to be the last person that acts. You're going to sit back and do surveillance and watch and listen and see what's going on. Where I've got 6 kids, I've got businesses here, I've got a ton of people that we all rely on each other for stuff. We're going to be the first ones that try to have to act. And so, but then we might have to be the first ones that have to move, because this place might become unlivable very quickly. And if anybody's ever seen what happens in an urban environment when it goes bad, it starts looking like that. What's that movie with Will Smith when New York gets all green?
I Am Legend.
I Am Legend.
Yeah.
The shit's like green all of a sudden and is decayed like instantly. As soon as life stops working there, it goes to shit.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to move. Well, what do I do with my 2,000 pounds of food that I've been saving? It's like, you can't take it with you. So you got to think about that as well.
Yep.
A lot of people will say, no, I'm good. I can recolonize right here in my own backyard. Like, no, you may have to move. So don't get too stuck into that. And again, it's like, goes back to what I said earlier. I think the true nature of life is uncertainty. Yeah. That's the whole point of us living, is to not know what happens next. And so don't strain and twist yourself into trying to find out what's going to happen, because you don't. But
yeah, you can't be rigid.
You can be prepared at the same time.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I mean, it's just the world's changing, and it's always done that. I mean, the only constant is change, right? And so, man, the flexibility to go with it and to be your best self in those situations, I think is really critical. And I don't know. I kind of find it exciting. I think life's fun. So let's see what happens.
Yeah. So it's good to have survival insurance. We talked about that earlier. Like, it's like, what do we do? It's like, we're kind of a survival insurance company,
Yeah, it's weird. Like people buy health insurance, they buy car insurance, and that's kind of a monetary replacement system, in the end. A lot of times, like, you crash your car, you get money back for a car. But like, man, like survival insurance, that's the stuff that's like immediate, right? Like having the right stuff, being ready for something is maybe life-changing or life-saving. So it's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
So however you look at these things, make sure and I think these 4 points that you covered, today with us is an insurance policy. If you think about it, if you're out there thinking about your community, that's the biggest step, as to recap here. Yep. Mental and physical fitness and awareness and spatial awareness and situational awareness, self-reflection, self-actualization, all these things, man, is like, that's hugely important, because I want to know as much as I possibly can about myself before adversity introduces me to something else.
Exactly.
Which you're going to, no matter how much you're prepared. Like you mentioned earlier, like we still, even special operations guys, athletes, Olympians, they'll always say, man, there's something I can do better, because we've seen that world. We look through a different lens. Resources, depending on you and your lifestyle and how you work, resources they're extremely important and valuable to have until you don't, which is then where the resourcefulness comes in. And resourcefulness is simple, not necessarily just a hunting and fishing aspect, or the gathering, gardening, water collection, food, all that stuff. You have to be resourceful in order to go do those things. You have to learn to be resourceful there, but to catch a fish, to
change a car tire. It's just
life
skills.
Life skills, yeah. But there are also times that you're going to have to be resourceful and not have the answer, to not have the resource. So being creative, being determined, having resolve, passion. I mean, passion's huge, right? So it'll get you through a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think ultimately, curiosity. And I think that's what a lot of people are losing in today's world, is the ability to be curious, right? Because we're stuck in these stupid ass devices all the time. So, and if you go back to, I think Socrates said it, curiosity creates wisdom. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the greatest resourceful tool you can have, is just be curious of these things we're talking about. We don't have a certain plan. There's a lot of people out there that run survival companies like, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to get. And if you don't do this, you're going to die.
Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right?
Good luck with that, man. Yeah, I don't suggest anybody that's even teaching survival to be able to be absolute like that, because there's one thing that I'm absolute about, is to never be absolute.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, boredom, we don't have boredom anymore because we've always got a phone that's going to entertain us, but boredom drives creativity. And I think a lot about just being in nature and turning the technology off and just being with your thoughts and letting your brain wander. That's a really important thing that doesn't happen anymore. Kids don't go out in the sandbox and just build stuff and imagine. They have entertainment being pushed to them. And that's really creating a problem in generations, as I've read up on this. So,
you see it. You see kids don't know how to use their hands. They don't know how to, physically do. There's a motor cortex, a deficiency there because they're not in the sand building things. They're touching on a screen nowadays. Yeah. So if you have kids out there, try to limit that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't say take it away from them because the problem is that's where their community is. These media companies, man, they make your world in here. So this is where all your friends after school meet. And so you go to that meeting place, but it's not real.
Right.
And that's very dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, dude, what I want people to see your stuff. Uncharted Supply, .com.
UnchartedSupplyCo.com.
What's that?
UnchartedSupplyCo.com. Yeah.
And what about your social media so people can?
Mine's my name at Christian Schauf or at Uncharted Supply Co. And listen, like I said earlier, this is a mission for me. If anybody's got questions or if they want to be helpful and give us tips or their perspective, like this is my life's work. I've put my entire life savings into this. I'm 42 and single. I get up before the sun goes up and I go to bed long after. And this is what I do, and this is the mission I'm on, and I'm hopeful that it makes a difference. So I'm here to be of service, and I appreciate the opportunity, Travis. Thanks for having me. And I'm just here to help. So hit me up.
Well, dude, thanks for making the world a better place than what you came in it, because you're certainly doing that.
Thanks, man.
With all of your stuff in the past, the military, and keeping our heads on straight with music and entertainment, that's incredibly important to us because you don't get that out there. Yeah. And your selfless service. That's awesome, dude. So thanks for coming on today, brother.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks.